For 5 centuries, they've been the Pope's silent shadows, a living testament to discipline carved in flesh and blood.
So, what on earth could make one Swiss Guard move?
During the funeral of Pope Benedictus himself, this isn't just a story about a protocol breached.
It's about a hidden instruction, a deeply personal bond, and a Pope who understood that sometimes true faith requires more than just standing still. Over the next few minutes, we'll journey into the heart of this extraordinary moment. First, we'll uncover the almost forgotten encounter and the secret directive from Pope Benedictus that set these incredible events in motion.
Then you'll witness the quiet courage of Sergeant Davis, a man caught between centuries of iron tradition and a profoundly personal command from the pontiff himself, and ultimately, we'll explore a question that resonates far beyond the Vatican walls, a question that perhaps touches each of us. When is the most faithful act, the one that truly honors the spirit, actually to step outside the lines? It's a story that challenges our conventional ideas of duty, loyalty, and the very essence of what it means to serve a higher calling. Now, before we delve into the heart of that solemn day in Vatican City, let me ask you,
have you ever found yourself in a situation where your deeply held convictions, your conscience, pulled you in one direction, while the established rules, the expectations, pointed firmly in another?
Let's journey back, then, to a Vatican draped in mourning, and to a single, quiet act of devotion that would whisper through its ancient corridors for years to come. Our story truly begins not with the funeral, but with the extraordinary man Pope Benedictus was, and an unexpected encounter that would irrevocably shape the life of Sergeant Michael Davis. To understand the gravity of that single, solitary step Sergeant Davis took, we first need to appreciate the world he inhabited, a world bound by vows centuries in the making.
The Pontifical Swiss Guard, their very name evokes images of unwavering loyalty, of a discipline so profound it seems almost superhuman.
Born in the early 16th century, in 1506 to be precise, their story isn't just one of ceremonial duty.
It's etched in sacrifice.
Imagine Rome, 1527, the infamous sack of the city.
While chaos reigned, 147 Swiss Guards laid down their lives defending Pope Clement VII, allowing him to escape. That day, their legend was forged in blood and courage.
It's a legacy they carry not as a burden, but as a sacred honor.
Their oath isn't merely to protect the physical person of the Pope.
It's a pledge to the very dignity and continuity of the Holy See. They are more than bodyguards. They are living symbols.
Each man is meticulously chosen,
rigorously trained physically, mentally, spiritually. Their stillness, that iconic immobility you see at papal events, isn't for show. It's a discipline honed to perfection, a visual representation of their inner commitment. Their very presence is a silent, constant prayer of service.
And on this day, as the world held its breath, mourning the passing of Pope Benedictus, that discipline was paramount. St. Peter's Square was a sea of hushed humanity.
Cardinals, dignitaries, pilgrims, all eyes were on the solemn proceedings, and by extension on these stoic guardians. Before the ceremony, Commandant Valerius, a man whose own life was a testament to the Guard's iron will, addressed his men. His words, though spoken privately, would have resonated with the weight of history. Gentlemen, he would have said, his gaze sweeping over them. Today, the world watches not just Rome, but us. Our comportment, our unwavering dedication, reflects the strength and solemnity of the Holy Mother Church.
There can be no deviation, no lapse.
Absolute perfection is expected.
The memory of His Holiness and the dignity of this moment demand nothing less.
And amidst this phalanx of unwavering loyalty, under the immense pressure of global scrutiny and the stern command of his superior, stood Sergeant Michael Davis, a man moulded by 15 years of such exactitude, his record impeccable. Outwardly, he was the epitome of the Swiss Guard,
but inwardly, a different kind of vow, a whispered instruction, was beginning to stir.
You see, these traditions, these solemn duties, they aren't just empty rituals. They are the threads that weave the very fabric of institutions, giving them form and meaning and continuity.
They connect the present to a deep and storied past.
Pause, it's a powerful tapestry.
But what happens when a single, human thread feels a pull in a different direction? A pull that seems to tug not against the fabric, but towards a pattern only it can perceive.
To understand the courage, or perhaps to some, the audacity of that single step Sergeant Davis was contemplating, we must first understand the man himself. A man whose life until then had been a symphony of precision and obedience.
So, who was Sergeant Michael Davis, this man of seemingly unbreakable composure?
His life, up until that pivotal moment, was a study in dedication.
Born and raised in a small town in Kent, or perhaps a quiet suburb outside Boston, if we lean American, young Michael was always drawn to order, to things done just right.
His father, a master carpenter, or perhaps an engineer, instilled in him a respect for precision, for the beauty found in meticulous work.
It wasn't a harsh discipline, but rather a quiet appreciation for a job well done.
For 15 years, the pontifical Swiss Guard had been his world, his calling. He wasn't just wearing a uniform.
He embodied its ideals.
His colleagues respected him not just for his flawless record, but for the quiet integrity that shone through. To Michael Davis, duty wasn't a burden.
It was a framework, a way to serve something larger than himself.
His every action was a note in a perfectly orchestrated symphony of obedience.
But even the most meticulously crafted life can encounter the unexpected, a moment that doesn't quite fit the established pattern.
A few years before Pope Benedictus's passing, on a bustling afternoon much like any other, Sergeant Davis found himself facing such a moment. A little boy, no older than 4, had become separated from his parents.
Lost in a sea of adult legs, his small face crumpled in tears.
Protocol was clear: maintain position, inform security.
But the child's distress was immediate, palpable. For a brief second, the sergeant hesitated.
Then, in a movement so subtle, it was almost imperceptible to the passing crowds,
Michael Davis broke his perfect stillness. He knelt, just for a moment, spoke a few gentle words, and with a quick, discreet gesture, pointed the frantic mother, who had just rounded a corner, towards her son. A small act, quickly over.
He thought no one had truly noticed, but someone had.
A few days later, Sergeant Davis received an unexpected summons.
Not a reprimand, as he might have half feared, but an invitation.
Monsignor Albinus, Pope Benedictus's trusted private secretary, led him through quiet corridors to the Pope's private study, a room filled not with grandeur, but with books, warmth, and the scent of old paper. Pope Benedictus, a man known for his profound intellect, possessed an equally profound humanity. He looked at Davis, not as a pontiff to a god, but as one man to another. Sergeant Davis, Monsignor Albinus tells me you
assisted a young pilgrim the other day.
Broke formation, I believe. Davis, ever respectful, began to explain, to perhaps apologize. No, my son.
Tell me, not what the rulebook says, but what your heart said in that moment. And so, Michael Davis found himself sharing a simple truth, perhaps a fleeting memory of being lost himself as a child, or just the undeniable pull of a child's distress.
Pope Benedictus listened intently, his chin resting on his hand. Ah, compassion. A powerful current, isn't it? Rules, Sergeant, are like the banks of a river.
They give it direction, purpose, prevent it from flooding the land aimlessly.
But the river itself, that is the spirit, the lifeblood. Sometimes, he paused, his gaze distant for a moment. The most sacred duty is to ensure the river flows, even if it means gently reshaping the bank. He looked directly at Davis, a profound understanding in his eyes.
I once faced a choice, between the unyielding letter of the law and a pressing human need.
I chose the letter.
It's a regret that has walked with me for many years.
Remember this, Michael. The spirit gives life. The letter, if unyielding, can sometimes stifle it. Sergeant Davis left that study a changed man, not in his dedication to duty, but in his understanding of its deepest source.
The Pope's words, his quiet vulnerability, had planted a seed
that would lie dormant, waiting for the right moment, the right rain, to break through the carefully cultivated soil of his life. He learned that day that precision and compassion weren't opposites, but two sides of the same coin of true service. One guided the hand, the other the heart, and sometimes the heart knew a straighter path.
Years passed. The seed Pope Benedictus had planted in Sergeant Davis's heart lay quietly, nurtured by that singular encounter. Life in the Vatican continued its ancient rhythm, a blend of solemn ceremony and the quiet hum of daily work. But time, as it always does, began to cast its long shadow. The world began to notice Pope Benedictus, once so vigorous, showing signs of increasing frailty.
Each public appearance was cherished. Each word carried an extra weight.
For those who served him closely, like Sergeant Davis, the changes were more personal, observed with a quiet concern that transcended mere duty.
There was a palpable sense that an era was drawing to a close.
Then, one evening, as the Vatican settled into its nocturnal quiet, Monsignor Albinus sought out Sergeant Davis.
The elderly secretary, a man who had served popes for decades, carried an air of solemn purpose.
He found Davis in a quiet corner, away from the lingering echoes of the day.
"Sergeant, a word, if I may." He gestures Davis to a more private space.
His Holiness, he is preparing for his journey, as he calls it.
"He asked me to give this to you. Personally," he said, "you would understand the timing."
And that some bonds, some understandings, transcend even the chair of Peter. Monsignor Albinus gives a small, sad smile, a look of deep respect for both men, then quietly departs. Alone, under the soft glow of a single lamp, Michael Davis opened the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably Pope Benedictus's, a little less firm than he remembered from years past, but filled with a familiar clarity and warmth. My dear Michael,
"If you are reading this, then my time among you is drawing to its earthly close, and I have begun what I pray will be my final journey home."
Our conversation, all those years ago, about the lost child, about rules and the spirit that animates them, it has often returned to my thoughts, a small, bright moment.
In you, Michael, I recognize something precious. Guardian not merely of protocol, but of the deeper, human truths our faith represents. There are men who stand guard out of solemn duty, and they are commendable.
And then there are men who stand guard out of love, out of a profound understanding of the heart. The world needs both, but I believe heaven especially treasures the latter.
Should a moment come,
A moment when the letter of tradition, the weight of centuries, feels like a cage around the very soul it is meant to protect.
trust your heart, my son.
True discipline, the kind that echoes in eternity, is not always found in perfect stillness.
Sometimes it is found in the courage to move, in the wisdom to act, in service of a higher, quieter stillness. I will not hear your footsteps on that day, Michael, should it come.
But I trust, with all that I am, that I will feel their intent, walk in God's peace, and know you carry an old man's blessing, Benedictus.
The words settled deep within Sergeant Davis. It wasn't a command in the usual sense, not an order to be obeyed blindly.
It was an entrustment, a profound act of faith from one man to another, from a shepherd to one of his flock.
He understood, with a clarity that pierced through his grief, that Pope Benedictus had given him not just a letter, but a sacred responsibility. In that quiet room, with the weight of the pontiff's final words resting upon him, Michael Davis knew that the path ahead, whenever that moment might arrive, would be his alone to walk.
He also knew, with a certainty that anchored his soul, that he would not be walking it without guidance. For sometimes, the truest instructions aren't shouted from on high, but whispered from one heart to another, carried on the breath of trust.
The day arrived, draped in a veil of global sorrow. St. Peter's Square, the very heart of the Catholic world, became a stage for a final, poignant farewell to Pope Benedictus.
Kings and commoners, cardinals and pilgrims, all gathered under a grey Roman sky, united in grief and respect.
The great bells of St. Peter's tolled, their mournful sound washing over the city.
As the humble casket of Pope Benedictus began its slow journey, the world watched.
And among those watching and those serving was Sergeant Michael Davis. Protocol dictated stillness.
Centuries of tradition demanded unwavering immobility. His training, his very instinct as a Swiss guard, screamed for him to remain a steadfast, unmoving pillar. But in his heart, a different directive echoed the gentle, trusting words of the man they now mourned.
A promise made.
A final, personal act of service requested not by a pontiff to a soldier, but by one soul to another.
The weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders, the scrutiny of millions. Yet it was the weight of that small, handwritten letter, tucked safely near his heart, that pressed most heavily.
The moment hung suspended in time. Every fibre of his being was conditioned to obey, to conform, to be the unshakable sentinel. But Pope Benedictus had spoken of a higher stillness, a courage found not always in perfect immobility, but in the wisdom to act.
And then he moved, a single, solitary figure detaching from the perfectly aligned ranks.
Heads turned.
A collective, almost inaudible gasp rippled through the nearest onlookers.
Cameras, initially focused on the coffin, swiveled to capture this unexpected, unprecedented act. With a grace born of deep conviction, Sergeant Davis approached the bier.
He knelt, not in insubordination, but in a final personal act of homage.
There, for all the world to see, he placed Pope Benedictus's last private message, a testament to their unique bond, upon the very vessel that would carry him on his final journey. Then, as quickly as he had moved, he returned to his position, his duty outwardly resumed.
But everything was different.
The unspoken rules had been bent.
A silent message had been delivered, not through edict or pronouncement, but through a single courageous act of personal faith. The immediate aftermath was a tableau of unspoken emotions: shock, disbelief, perhaps, for some, a dawning understanding. The carefully orchestrated solemnity of the occasion had been pierced by an act of profound and profoundly human devotion. That single step, that quiet placement of a letter, was more than just a breach of protocol.
It was a testament to the enduring power of personal connection, a reminder that even within the most rigid structures, the human heart, guided by love and loyalty, can find a way to speak its truth. The world had witnessed an act of defiance, yes, but perhaps also an act of the deepest fidelity. The final Amen of Pope Benedictus's funeral had barely faded when the internal gears of the Vatican began to turn. Sergeant Davis's singular act, witnessed by millions, could not be ignored.
The echoes of his footsteps now resonated within the ancient walls, demanding a reckoning. Sergeant Davis,
your actions were an affront, a flagrant disregard for centuries of sacred tradition, for the uniform you wear, for the solemnity of the occasion itself. What, in God's name, were you thinking? Commandant Valerius, a man whose life was defined by the letter of the law, could barely contain his fury.
But Sergeant Davis, though undoubtedly aware of the storm he had unleashed, remained calm.
Commandant, your eminence, with all due respect, I believed I was honoring a tradition even deeper the personal wishes of His Holiness Pope Benedictus, and the spirit of compassion he so often spoke of. He entrusted me with a final message, a personal one. He then presented the copy of Pope Benedictus's letter.
As Cardinal Morandi read, the heavy silence in the room seemed to deepen. The words of the late pontiff, so personal, so direct, hung in the air, creating a dilemma of profound proportions. Here was an institution built on order, on immutable rules, on the visible adherence to tradition.
And here was one of its most trusted guardians, who had, by all outward appearances, flouted those very principles. Yet, he had done so under what appeared to be the explicit, heartfelt wishes of the Pope himself.
Loyalty to the institution, or loyalty to the man who had so recently embodied it. Sergeant, the highly personal nature of this communication from His Holiness presents an unprecedented situation. Your service record, your years of dedication, are not in question. Officially, there will be no public censure. However, his gaze becomes sterner. You must understand that your role in ceremonial duties, in the public eye, is no longer tenable.
The precedent, the visibility of your actions.
It simply cannot be. I understand, Your Eminence. While the Vatican deliberated in private, the ripples of Sergeant Davis's act were already spreading across the globe.
News of the moving god of Vatican City, as some dubbed him, sparked a whirlwind of discussion. Fictional news anchor, an unprecedented breach of protocol at the papal funeral today, has observers questioning.
Traditionalists decried what they saw as a lapse in sacred decorum. Fictional commentator. This sets a dangerous precedent. What is tradition if it can be so easily set aside? Others, however, hailed it as an act of profound personal loyalty, a testament to a love that transcended mere duty.
Fictional member of the public. It was beautiful, so human. He was honoring his friend. Online forums basked. Coffee shop conversations debated. When does obedience become blind? When is breaking a rule an act of higher fidelity?
The official judgment, though not a public condemnation, carried its own weight.
But as Sergeant Davis stepped out of that austere room, a familiar, comforting presence met him.
He knew, Michael. Pope Benedictus knew the heart of his guards.
He understood the quiet strength within you. He would have known the choice you'd make, and he would have understood the cost. The world had rendered its varied judgments, and the Vatican had made its decision. But for Sergeant Davis, the most important verdict had already been given, in the quiet trust of a dying pope. His public role had changed, but perhaps his true service was only just beginning to take a new form.
And so, Sergeant Michael Davis was quietly reassigned.
No longer a sentinel under the public gaze, he found himself in a different kind of service, amidst the silent, storied corridors of the Vatican Apostolic Archive. Here, the echoes were not of marching feet or papal pronouncements, but of whispers from centuries past. Welcome, Michael.
Here, we guard memories, the very chronicles of our church. Some say history holds its own truths, often quieter, but no less profound than those proclaimed from balconies.
Your precision will be valued here. A subtle, knowing smile.
Days turned into weeks, then months.
Michael Davis immersed himself in his new role.
He learned to navigate the labyrinthine shelves, to decipher ancient scripts, to preserve the fragile records of faith, folly, courage, and compassion that made up the church's long and complex story.
And in the quiet solitude of the archives, surrounded by the weight of history, he found an unexpected peace, a different kind of purpose.
He discovered stories of saints who challenged norms, of thinkers who pushed boundaries, of quiet acts of mercy that shifted the course of events. He began to see that the tapestry of faith was woven not just with threads of unwavering obedience, but also with those of courageous conviction, of individuals who dared to listen to that deeper call, even when it set them apart.
Pope Benedictus's words about the Spirit and the letter echoed with new meaning. "Excuse me, sir.
Aren't you the God who moved at the Pope's funeral?"
I saw it on the news with my dad." "Yes, son."
"That was me. My dad said you broke a really, really big rule. Weren't you scared? Why did you do it?"
"Rules are very important, young man. They're like fences, built to protect what's precious inside, to keep things safe and in order. And usually, it's right to stay within those fences. But sometimes," he pauses, his gaze kind and direct, "the most respectful thing you can do, the bravest thing, is to recognize when the fence itself might be preventing something truly important from happening, or when it might be harming the very spirit it's supposed to protect."
Pope Benedictus, he taught me that true loyalty, the deepest kind, is to the spirit of the law, not always just the letter. Sergeant Michael Davis was no longer a sentinel of grand ceremonies, bathed in the public eye.
He became a quiet guardian of history, of whispered truths and enduring legacies.
He learned that the ultimate discipline wasn't mere stillness, but the wisdom to know why one stands, and the courage to move when love, conscience, and a higher understanding demand it. Pope Benedictus's final lesson was not etched in stone or proclaimed from a pulpit. It was a quiet entrustment, an act of faith passed from one devoted heart to another.
A profound reminder that even within the most ancient and revered institutions, the human spirit, guided by compassion and courage, can illuminate the path forward, ensuring that tradition serves life and not the other way around.
The story of Sergeant Davis and Pope Benedictus leaves us with much to ponder. What do you believe?
Is there a time when breaking the rules is not an act of rebellion, but the highest form of loyalty?
When has your own conscience called you to step outside the lines?
We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.
If this story resonated with you, please give it a like, share it with someone who might appreciate it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the deeper connections in our world.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.